2 spots on my queer fitness retreat have just opened up. You can apply to join us over on SkrmettiTurner.com. Huge news. The future of trans healthcare is being determined in a landmark Supreme Court case challenging Tennessee's ban on trans healthcare for minors. But this case isn't just about Tennessee, and it's not just about minors. This decision will determine how the government sees trans people and whether or not the constitutional rights that are supposed to apply to every American apply to us. Which means that if we don't win, a precedent could be set for any state to ban trans healthcare for people of all ages, also laying the groundwork for Trump's national ban. And that's because the Tennessee law at issue, SB 1, bans the use of puberty blockers and hormones as gender-affirming care for trans minors, but still allows those same medications and treatments to be used by cis minors. It's interesting how, despite all of the fear-mongering around what they call these dangerous, experimental, irreversible treatments, they're perfectly okay with it for minors who aren't trans. Now, shouldn't we also protect those children? It reminds me of this study that found 97% of gender-affirming breast reduction surgeries on minors were done on cis males. So basically, when it comes to minors having top surgery, only 3% were trans. Further proving what we already know, the vast majority of gender-affirming care goes to cis people. And that is especially true when looking at gender-affirming care for minors. But nobody's gonna tell a 17-year-old cis boy with gynecomastia that he's gonna regret having his boobs removed, because that's fucking stupid. He's not going to be standing in the mirror 5 years from now looking at his chest wishing he still had boobs. And neither are the far fewer trans boys who do the same. So when it comes to banning gender-affirming care for transgender minors while still allowing all of those same medications and treatments for cisgender minors, it's not about protecting them, it's about stopping them from transitioning. The Tennessee ban literally states that it's only prohibited when it conflicts with a person's birth sex, which is the opposite of protecting trans youth. It's putting them at a much higher risk of anxiety, depression, and suicide, which is what the research overwhelmingly shows trans people suffer when we are denied the ability to transition and live comfortably as ourselves. But when we are able to transition, especially when we are accepted and supported by the people around us, we thrive. All major medical organizations recognize this and support gender-affirming care as a treatment for dysphoria. There is no legitimate reason for the government to ban gender-affirming care, and banning it for one group of people while still allowing it for everyone else is blatant discrimination. Point blank, full stop, period. Now, apparently the Constitution has something called the Equal Protection Clause. I wouldn't know because I can't read, but people who are smarter than me say that it's there to stop shit like this from happening. So the family of a 16-year-old trans girl from Tennessee who have had to travel out of state for her healthcare since the ban took effect in 2023 are fighting back. LW's family, represented by the ACLU, filed a lawsuit last year arguing that the law unconstitutionally discriminates on the basis of sex and undermines parental rights. Hey, check this out. Stay huge. Huge news with Ty Turner merch over on SkrmettITurner.com, and the hat. Peep the hat, don't forget it. Look at that embroidery, look at that hat. Huge news merch over on SkrmettITurner.com. And by God, stay huge. The Supreme Court heard oral arguments on Wednesday, December 4th to decide whether or not it is sex-based discrimination to allow one sex to receive a medical treatment and not the other. Seems like the question answers itself, but obviously that's not the actual concern of the anti-trans side. They aren't actually concerned with what's constitutional or what's fair or what's safe. Their only concern in this is stopping people from transitioning. And that's not speculation. They literally say this within the first 2 minutes of the hearing.
This case is about access to medications that have been safely prescribed for decades to treat many conditions, including gender dysphoria. But SB 1 singles out and bans one particular use. In Tennessee, these medications can't be prescribed to allow a minor to identify with or live as a gender inconsistent with the minor's sex. It doesn't matter what parents decide is best for their children. It doesn't matter what patients would choose for themselves. And it doesn't matter if doctors believe this treatment is essential for individual patients. SB 1 categorically bans treatment when, and only when, it's inconsistent with the patient's birth sex. To be clear, states have leeway to regulate gender-affirming care, but here Tennessee made no attempt to tailor its law to its stated health concerns. Rather than impose measured guardrails, SB 1 bans the care outright, no matter how critical it is for an individual patient. The state has left no out for those patients to obtain these medications when there's a showing of individualized medical need. And that is, I think, a stark departure from how the state ordinarily handles issues related to measuring risks and benefits, even in the pediatric context.
Well, is there no difference if a girl takes testosterone or if a boy takes testosterone?
So the district court specifically considered this question in detail and found that with respect to the risks that the state had identified, it was not substantiated that there would be unique risks associated with the cross-sex use of the hormones.
Is there no physiological difference?
Certainly, I understand that there are biological differences between males and females, but when it came to the specific risk factors that the state was focused on, what the district court found is that many of those risk factors would exist regardless of the birth sex of who is taking those medications.
Well, I'm more interested in whether or not there is a difference in testosterone and its reaction in a male as opposed to a female, and vice versa for estrogen.
Kicking it off by saying right at the top, we don't care if there's no difference in risk. We just care that it makes people transition.
So if you take hormones, they will prompt the development of secondary sex characteristics. And in fact, that's one of the intended effects of these treatments, because that can be critical to helping manage gender dysphoria that transgender adolescents would otherwise experience. But I think when it comes to the question of whether that creates unique risks, the district court found that for the most part, the state had not substantiated those risks, and that it leaves regulation of medication unrestricted, even in contexts where these same medications or others would pose a comparable set of risks.
And I love the response here. Yeah, it's not exactly a gotcha to point out that when a trans person goes on hormones, they transition. That's the whole fucking point. But we're here to talk about if there's any real basis for the government to make a sweeping ban on gender-affirming care for trans people, other than you just don't like it. You think it's kind of weird, so illegal. Now, during this Supreme Court hearing, trans history was made again. Another trans history, even more trans history, was made by Chase Strangio. He was the first ever openly trans person to make oral arguments in front of the Supreme Court, making trans history while fighting for trans rights in a historic trans case. Does that make sense? Or am I just sitting here sounding dumb? Are you mad at me?
And today we were able to stand before this court and say the Constitution protects trans people just like it protects everyone else. It is breaking no new ground to recognize that when you are prohibited from receiving something because of your sex, it is the role of the courts to ensure that the government can satisfy its burden of showing that it has a good reason for doing so. Tennessee did not meet their burden. This law, we believe, is unconstitutional. And perhaps the scariest thing for all of us is that Tennessee's arguments would apply if Congress tomorrow banned this care nationally for adolescents, for adults. They claim that there are no protections based on sex for the transgender people who, like myself, who rely on this medical care.
I'm so glad we had him representing us in there. Honestly, every clip and quote I've seen from him is absolute fire. And he was standing there in front of a conservative supermajority, quite literally speaking truth to power. Bravo, I could never. Put me in that room, Luigi's gonna be out of the news cycle real fast.
FBI, open up!
I don't believe in the glorification of murder. I do believe in the empowerment of women.
The anti-trans talking points were exactly what you would expect.
You say there are benefits from allowing these treatments, but there are also harms, right, from allowing these treatments. At least the state says so, including lost fertility, the physical and psychological effects on those who later change their mind and want to detransition, which I don't think we can ignore.
My understanding is that the Constitution leaves that question to the people's representatives rather than to 9 people, none of whom is a doctor.
But yes, we did get some very refreshing moments where it is so obvious that the justices who are actually willing to listen are like shocked they can see what an insane government overreach this is. Like at one point, Justice Sotomayor basically tells them to stop focusing on the fearmongering, cut the shit, let's talk about what we're here to talk about.
They cannot stand up here and say that if these alternatives were imposed, that there would be no detransitioners. So they cannot eliminate the risk of detransitioners. So it becomes a pure exercise of weighing benefits versus risk. And the question of how many minors have to have their bodies irreparably harmed for unproven benefits is one that is best left.
I'm sorry, Counselor. Every medical treatment has a risk. Even taking aspirin. There is always going to be a percentage of the population under any medical treatment that's going to suffer a harm. So the question in my mind is not, do policymakers decide whether one person's life is more valuable than the millions of others who get relief from this treatment? The question is, can you stop one sex from the other? One person of one sex from another sex from receiving that benefit?
And she just keeps spitting facts.
The medical condition is the same.
We don't
but
agree.
You're saying one sex is getting it and the other's not.
We do not agree that the medical condition is the same. We do not think that giving puberty blockers to a 6-year-old that has started precocious puberty is the same medical treatment as giving it to a minor who wants to transition. Those are not the same medical treatment. And once
what
you
you're saying
recognize...
is you're still depending on sex to identify who can get it and who can't.
I don't think so, Your Honor. If a minor comes up to, a boy goes to the doctor and says, I want puberty blockers to transition, the answer will be no. If a girl goes up to the doctor and says, I want...
If a sex-neutral looking child walks into a doctor and says, I don't want to grow breasts, doesn't the doctor have to know whether it's a girl or a boy before they prescribe the drug?
I don't think so, Your Honor.
I've got to tell you, I've made that mistake on children often. Look at one of them and think it's a boy, and I'm corrected, and it's a girl, and vice versa. I hope that you're not going to tell me you haven't made that mistake.
Well, I may have made that mistake, Your Honor, but I don't think that is an example of where a sex-based line is being drawn.
Why not?
Yeah,
please.
Because all that matters is the medical purpose for which the drug is used. So if the minor comes up, if you have a biological
No, it's the same medical purpose. Her hypothetical is, I don't want to grow breasts. Same medical purpose. I'm trying to stop the development of breasts.
That is such a great hypothetical scenario, perfectly demonstrating the sex discrimination. So what's the counterpoint to that, you might wonder?
Well, Your Honor, I think that likely would not be allowed under SB 1 for a girl.
For a woman who is, for a girl, but
yeah,
it
and
would.
It would also not be allowed under Tennessee law with respect to a biological boy.
Really?
Well, cis males can't get puberty blockers. A blatant lie. This statute states that cis males and cis females can get puberty blockers and hormones, but trans people can't. It's specifically banning them from being used in a way that's inconsistent with the birth sex. But he repeatedly refers to another statute saying that cis people can't get these medications unless they have a medical need for it. To which you might be thinking, yeah, no fucking shit, that's how medicine works.
Tennessee law doesn't just allow doctors to prescribe drugs without a medical purpose. They can't.
No. But the way I understood the law to work is it has to be inconsistent with your sex in order for it to be blocked. You know, I don't understand why it would work in the way that you're saying. Why wouldn't it be differentiating on the basis of gender? A girl who doesn't want to grow breasts for whatever reason could or could not get it.
Does not want to grow breasts without a medical reason, could not get it.
And a boy who doesn't want to grow breasts could or could not get it.
Could not get it if there was no medical purpose. Different medical purposes.
But they couldn't get it not under this law, right? Because this law is operating around the inconsistency. So if they couldn't get it, it would be for some other reason.
But they do not let up, and I absolutely love that. And he finally admits it.
But we have other laws in Tennessee law that prevent malpractice and that prevent the use of drugs for a non-medical
I understand,
purpose.
but this law is the one that is being challenged today, and we're trying to decide whether or not it's operating on a sex-based basis. What about my lower voice
hypothetical.
Yeah.
All right. So a biological boy comes in and asks for a hormone treatment to deepen his voice. Can he get it?
If there's no medical purpose, no.
No, that's the medical purpose. I don't understand what you mean. The purpose is to bring on a deepening of their voice.
Let me try to rephrase.
Yes.
If there's no medical condition, the answer is no. You cannot use testosterone for purely cosmetic reasons. It's a Schedule III drug.
In this statute or in another statute?
In another statute.
Okay.
The fact that he had to sit there and lie repeatedly says it all.
So setting aside that other statute, we're looking at this one and how it operates. This statute says something about inconsistency with your biological sex, and that's what I'm trying to test. The boy comes in, he asks for a hormone treatment to deepen his voice, to affirm his masculinity. Can he get the treatment? Under this statute?
Under this statute, no, but under Tennessee Code annotated 63.
The boy could not, under this statute?
If there was no medical condition, no.
That's the other statute. Under this statute, with respect
Under
to
this
consistency, he could.
Under this statute, he could.
Okay.
Under 63-6-21412, he could not.
I understand. Setting aside that other statute, under this statute, he could. Now, looking at this statute, a girl comes in biologically and asks for a hormone to deepen her voice in order to affirm the identity that she chooses, which is masculinity. I'm asking you, would under this statute, she be precluded from getting that treatment?
Your Honor, I think if it's for the purpose of identifying inconsistent with their sex, she would be barred from doing that under the
But isn't that the point, Mr. Rice, that if it's for the purpose of identifying with their sex, I mean, the prohibited purpose here is treating gender dysphoria, which is to say that the prohibited purpose is something about whether or not one is identifying with one's own sex or another sex. The whole thing is imbued with sex. I mean, it's based on sex. You might have reasons for thinking that it's an appropriate regulation, and those reasons should be tested and respect given to them. But it's a dodge to say that this is not based on sex, it's based on medical purpose, when the medical purpose is utterly and entirely about sex.
Boom, there you go, end of discussion. But not really, there's 30 more minutes of discussion. But I'm going to leave it at that. Feel free to go listen to the whole hearing. It's frustrating, but the clapbacks are phenomenal. I will also link some recaps that you can read through in the description below. Huge respect to Giga Chad Chase Strangio for enduring hours of this, for being visible and vulnerable and strong, and huge respect to the justices who didn't fall for the fear-mongering and debunked transphobic talking points, who listened and did their jobs and held their peers accountable while being vastly outnumbered. Hearing those moments restored some much-needed hope. And speaking of shutting down transphobes, we have got to talk about what was happening outside of the Supreme Court on this day, because shit was absolutely popping off in the best way. So simultaneous pro-trans and anti-trans protests were taking place, and I'm not saying it's a competition, but we won. Matt Walsh got his ass booed. Marjorie Taylor Greene got her ass booed.
Any type of hormones or chemical castration pills to destroy their bodies.
Protesters demonstrated by taking testosterone right there, which is so fucking metal, I could never. I need full focus and silence. I literally announce it to the household. I'm doing my shot, no sounds, no sudden movements, don't come in here, don't even think about me right now. And the testosterone triggered a full-on Karen meltdown from this woman who decides that this is somehow a personal threat to her. I'm calling the cops. Classic. Of course you are. And I love this person not giving a single fuck while this lady is freaking out over nothing. And Elliot Page was there. Why wasn't I invited? I would have gone. And don't say it's just because I want to meet Elliot Page. Alright, there you have it, folks. The landmark Supreme Court case, U.S. versus Skrmetti. Our rights were sufficiently fought for. It's not looking great for us, but you never know. All that's left to do now is wait for the decision, expected in June 2025. God, that's so long. Well, in the meantime, you might as well become a channel member and hop in the Goose Troop Discord so we can wait together. Maybe kill some time over on SkelettiTurner.com checking out the new merch. We got the heavy metal trans rights merch. This is a sticker, and it's actually cut out around the logo. It's not just this big square. And we have hat, shirt, cup, patch, pants. Check them out. All right, that's it, folks. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to join the Goose Troop today. Give this video a thumbs up because 1 like equals 1 honk. This has been Huge News. I'm your host, Ty Turner. Have a wonderful day and stay huge.